Such a beautiful young man, a fantastic talent.
He was universally loved by everyone.
You think of Phil, you just see happy, smiley, fun.
Yeah, he was just a very likeable bloke.
He was a guy that always made you feel good about yourself.
I think it hit me pretty hard, I think.
Just sort of broke down for a good hour on the sofa.
To lose someone at 25 years is nothing but tragic.
I played with him in a under 15 New South Wales team, so we were about 14 at the time. And yeah, he was from a little country town, Maxville. We'd heard of this kid, Phil Hughes, and we'd heard how good he was, but until I sort of first saw him, I remember this at this under 15 carnival, just staggered really. I was at the other end and opening the batting, and I just remember some of the shots he played were just outstanding. And I suppose everyone's got stories like this, but I think how much better he was than his peers at that age. You know, a similar age to Steve Smith. Even at that age, you know, Philip was, you know, miles better than Smith.
He was a guy that burst onto the scene in Australian domestic cricket. You know, before too long, you kind of knew the name Phil Hughes. He was an entertainer. It wasn't before too long that he was scoring century after century and his name was getting talked to play Test cricket for Australia.
He was the youngest player ever to make 100 in a Shield final. I think the thing that made Phil so special was that he had this amazing confidence in his own ability. He had a wonderful eye and he had a different technique, but he backed his technique to the hilt.
We both got picked for a tour to South Africa. We made our Test debuts together. I think he made a duck.
3 slips a gully and a forward short leg. Oh no! What a way to start! Desperate moment for Phil Hughes and a glorious one for Dale Steyn.
He just replaced Matthew Hayden in the Test team. We went to the second Test at Durban and he'd missed out in the first Test at Johannesburg and he's facing probably one of the best attacks in the world at the time. And he went out there and scored 200s in the one Test.
To Hughes, 99. Goes in the air, it's going out the ground. What a way! What a way to get to your first Test 100. Philip Hughes in just his second Test, having got a duck on debut. Look at the reaction from Ricky Ponting. His elation is visible for all to see, and warm applause not only from the Australian dressing room but from all in at Kingsmead. It has been a super knock.
For a guy to kind of make 100 in each innings in his second Test match is pretty remarkable. And I think that was the thing that also, when you play with Phil or you played against him, you'd have many a moment where he'd play an innings or a certain shot where you kind of turn your head to your teammate and just go, wow, did that just happen? He's the kind of guy that you would empty the bars. I know that's a cliche, but you'd empty the bars, you'd pay money to go watch Phil Hughes bat.
It was fantastic to watch from the other end, and one thing that stood out for me was just how relaxed he was between overs. He had this young kid who would go down, talk at the end of each over, and he was, I guess, more concerned about talking about his cows back home in Maxville than he was about facing South Africa in that series.
No, it was my first signing, and then he suddenly got selected for Australia, and after we'd signed him, and then he got that 100. All of a sudden he's gone from sort of, who's this bloke, to the next sort of great Australian batsman. You think of Phil, you just see, I'll tell you what I think of Phil, well, just a happy, smiley, fun. Cricket was just was a game that he just loved playing.
Initially, you know, it's sort of, hi mate, how are you? You know, sort of conversation, and then quickly realised is, you know, for a young lad, he was quite chirpy. So yeah, I know, over a beer, you know, a couple of beers, you know, got on real well, and obviously spent quite a bit of time with him after that.
He'd come to Worcester. He obviously had quite a lot of success down at Middlesex. And you sort of obviously saw from the results down there that he was one hell of a player. And his first impressions when he got here was, what a lovely bloke, really. Yeah, lovable character, cheeky chappy, certainly in the dressing room, quite mature beyond his young years. But yeah, certainly just a great guy to have around, and a big influence on our group actually. Obviously burst on the scene in South Africa, and he did really well, and then sort of dropped off the radar a little bit. And I think he saw his opportunity in county cricket as playing when nobody else or not many other Australians were playing, to sort of get his name back up there in lights, if you like, and he certainly did that where he was with us. And then fortunate enough to see him back here at New Road the year after, playing for Australia against us. A couple of days before the start of that game, we had a T20 down at Cardiff, and the Aussies had just arrived in town on the Saturday night, I think it was, and they'd had a few beers, and we picked Hughesy up hungover from the Algar statue just by the cathedral, and took him to Cardiff to watch our T20. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen an overseas player on the bus as a spectator before. So it was, but that summed him up. He was obviously a big part of our group. We loved having him around, and he loved being around the lads as well. So that was, it was a special day really.
There were a couple of times afterwards where he'd come to London and all of a sudden he'd be in the dressing room and laughing and joking in the corner with the players, and he just sort of, that was the nature. He'd turn up in jeans and a shirt and a cap on, and some former players, sort of the stewards at the back of the pavilion will let in, but it was Phil. So yeah, go on, up you go.
A fantastic guy to be around. You know, I've can't ever remember a time of crossing paths or walking out the lift and seeing him down at breakfast where he hasn't just got this huge smile. He just had a fantastic appetite and enjoyment for life. He was a pleasure to kind of to be around. He was a guy that always made you feel good about yourself.
How are you, mate?
How did you hear? What had happened?
Obviously on the news, I think probably Sky Sports News, he'd been hit. You don't really think anything of it.
My colleague who was sitting next to me just informed me of the news that he'd been hit at the SCG, and immediately sent him a text hoping that he'd be okay.
I was actually here in London, so I just remember my phone going at about 6 o'clock in the morning.
You wake up and as we do, you kind of check your phone, and I did, and at that time it was about 10 minutes after he got hit.
I actually watched him bat that morning. I think there was it was a Sheffield Shield match at the cricket ground that day, and I watched the first hour, and then I was out the back having a hit, and I remember all the commotion or what it was at the time. So yeah, just a terrible few days, obviously, and terrible week.
I think everybody knew him would have you'd have broken down and had a cry, that's for sure, because I don't know. I mean, not just the fact that he was a good cricketer, but also the nature of the man was bloody hell. What? I mean, it was just, you spend all your life worrying about results and how you're doing out there, and then something like this happens, and you just think, for crying out loud, you don't know how lucky you are at times. So it hit really. I mean, you say talking about it now, you feel emotional doing it.
He was universally loved by everyone. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a bad word about Phil Hughes, and I guess he was well loved because of his character, and not because of his abilities as a cricketer, but who he was as a person, and that's probably the thing that hurt the hardest, not being able to see him again.
It just didn't seem real, really. There's nothing you don't ever expect that to happen from a cricket field. I remember that day just spending what seemed like hours and hours talking to press, really. I remember doing a couple of radio shows, a couple of TV shows, a couple of written journalists, and I got home at about 5 o'clock and just threw the phone to one side, turned it off, and just sort of broke down, really. I think all day I've been regurgitating the same stuff to the different sort of press people, and almost sort of on autopilot, really, and didn't seem real still. Just kept going over the same old stuff about what a great bloke he was, how big an impact he had at Worcester, and then I don't think it was until I got home that it really sunk in. I picked my little boy at the time. I don't think he was even one at that point. So yeah, and just sort of broke down for a good hour on the sofa. It was a real horrible time, really.
it sort of hits you hard, doesn't it? I think it hit me pretty hard. I think you know, I think one of the big things was it took me a bit of time to get over it. I think just actually you know, trying to put it to the back of your mind. I actually found that quite tough for a couple of seasons.
It was a shock for the cricketing world, and I think, you know, you still see that in people reflecting that were really close friends of Phil, the cricketing world in general, and I guess where technology and the focus is, you know, the helmets with the new protection is, you know, all in reflection of, you know, that fatal day with Phil.
I think there was already a focus on safety in cricket. We'd seen the ICC introduce new safety regulations a year or two earlier. Those helmets were just starting to come onto the market when that tragedy occurred. I think what it fundamentally did was point out there is absolute demand for neck protection. So we saw in the immediate aftermath manufacturers bringing products to market as quickly as possible in order to give players the opportunity to protect themselves from a blow to the back of the head. What we now see is a definition effectively for what a neck guard is, because previously, you know, you could, and some manufacturers did, pretty much put hobbycraft foam onto the back of a helmet, no testing. But what we'll see going forward, which is badly needed, is regulation in that space.
I was in the Warner stand when Steve Smith got hit by Jofra Archer last summer, and the reaction of some of the people around me when Steve Smith got felled, and you just thought, whoa. And it was like, there was that sort of moment where you think, no, no, no.
I think the game of cricket has definitely changed since the passing of Phil, and I think rightfully so. It's always been a tough game, both physically and mentally, but I think it certainly has softened in terms of what happened and obviously the worry around player safety. It's
definitely different to years gone by. You see the odd piece of footage, you know, where someone takes a blow and sort of no one comes in, and it's sort of part of the theatre and part of the game by the bowling side, I suppose, to try and you know, slam that intimidation in. So I think that's gone a little bit, but the way the game is played, I don't think has changed.
It was probably an initial period straight after where everyone was a little bit more wary and probably less bouncers were bowled. Probably, yeah, certainly less intent behind the bouncers, more of a sort of a just throwing the odd bouncer in there here and there just to not try and unsettle them, but don't want to get near them. But I think as time's gone on, I think that's the bouncer, rightly really, has come more and more back into the game.
The physicality of cricket doesn't come through, does it? It seems a very gentle game, and people wearing whites, and you go for tea and lunch, and it's not cricket and all this sort of stuff. And I suppose those of us within the game realise, I mean, you're standing up 22 yards of bloke for a ball from bowling at 90 miles an hour, and you know that he's after you. It's a pretty intimidating experience.
5 years on, how do you remember him? What's his legacy?
That cheeky smile is one that I'll never forget. The welcome of a g'day bruz whenever you saw him. The sheer energy the guy had for life and the passion that he had, and he enjoyed every single moment of it, and it's really infectious.
What he meant to the little country town. He was a real hero in the town, and I even remember distinctly in some of the pubs and whatever, there being photos up of him up on the wall.
He was a magnificent player, and we all know that, but just he's the one overseas player that's sort of been entwined in our dressing room more than anybody else, and yeah, it's a huge part of it. It's still something that I always look back on with fond memories because of his personality and that cheeky chappy and the laughs we had off the field as much as the performances we had on it.
It does get upsetting. I've spoken about his life with my boys, and I try and keep it as positive as possible. because there's a lot of great positive memories, but it's still hard to take because he was such a great teammate and mate. So I've got a photo at home, beautiful photo of us together, and that's something that I'm really proud of, and just knowing him and sharing that with my sons is something I'm really proud of.